First and foremost, I want to apologize that you're seeing this video on Saturday instead of the normal Wednesday that this upload should have been. Things have been very, very busy lately, and unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. So there's a very good possibility that there will not be 2 uploads a week for a little while. I will still definitely try, but if not, you can at least be rest assured you will always see an upload every single Saturday, no matter what, and hopefully the normal Wednesday and or Thursday uploads will still be a thing, but no guarantees. However, I will definitely try. With that being said, back to your normally scheduled program. Woo! Welcome back to another video. Today, we are going to be talking about 10 reasons why I love my 2011 Mustang GT. And we're gonna waste no time, let's get straight into it. The number one reason why I love my Ford Mustang GT is the sound. The sound! The sound! Of course, being a 2011 Mustang GT, this was the first year of the Ford Coyote 5.0 in the Mustang GT, and it is a absolutely superb motor. They're still using it in the current S650 Mustang GTs as well. Granted, that's a Gen 4 version. This is a Gen 1, but it's a great engine. This engine can hold lots of power. It makes really, really good power with basic bolt-ons, and it sounds fantastic. My car, I bought it with this exhaust setup on it. It has a full MBRP exhaust, basically MBRP long tube headers to a catted mid-pipe slash high flow H-pipe, whatever, to the MBRP street catback, and it's a really great sounding exhaust. Honestly, I might consider still later on changing the axle back portion of the exhaust to something else, just to get it just ever so slightly louder. It's very loud on startup, but it gets kind of mild as you're just cruising around. And I'd like maybe just a little bit more sound, but I'm kind of on the fence about that because it already sounds really great. I love the way this thing sounds. Number 2 is the design of the car. I love muscle cars, and I especially am a huge fan of retro designs in general, and this car is a very, very retro design. This same generation of the Mustang, but the earlier version of the S197, which is what this one is, in 2005 really kicked off the whole retro muscle car craze, and that's a car that I still think looks great today. And in my personal opinion, when it comes to the retro Mustang look, I think that the 2011 to 2014s, probably the 2013 and 2014s are kind of like the really peak retro Mustang look, and I absolutely love the overall design. It's just something that when I see one driving down the road, I just think, man, that's a nice car, that's just a good looking car, and I own one, and I'm very happy to say that. Love the way this thing looks. Reason number 3 that I love my Ford Mustang GT is the power. Or for those of you that do not live in the United States, the power. But let me repeat it once again for my fellow Americans, the power! Stock, this car makes 412 horsepower at the crank. This car has a few modifications like I already mentioned. It of course has the long tube headers and full exhaust. It also has VVK intake, so I'd expect it's probably pushing something like that to the wheels. So at the crank, I don't know, 450, 460, I don't know, somewhere in that range. That's a basic guess, I'm not 100% sure, but it has very, very good power, and the power is usable basically across the entire power band, which kind of gets us into our next point, but we're gonna just rewind real quick back to the power. Just straight up, this is the fastest car I've ever owned. It's fantastic. I love driving it. It is incredibly fun, and when you combine the great sound with the just fantastic feeling of acceleration that you get from this car, it is very exhilarating, and I absolutely love driving this thing. But we're gonna get back into the usable torque with the number 4 thing that I love about my Mustang GT, because the power band of this car is very, very nice. It's very linear, and it's not like it's all low-end torque, and it's not like any bit of power is way up at the top of the RPM band either, because the torque is very, I guess, like flat throughout the entire power band, which is really nice, and it just makes it pleasant for daily driving. If you need a little bit of acceleration, you get on the throttle a little bit, and that torque and that power is basically always there for you, which is nice. Because there are other cars that have a similar amount of power to this, like for instance, like an E92 M3 has 414 instead of 412, but almost all of that power is way up towards like the 7,900 RPM redline, which granted, a 7,900 RPM redline on a V8 is awesome, but it doesn't have nearly as much torque at like the lower RPM. So that is something that's nice just for daily driving about this, is that there's never a lack of passing power or anything like that. You don't have to wring it out to get the power, but if you do, still worth it. And the number 5 thing that I love about my Ford Mustang GT would be the reliability. This car is very reliable considering the performance of the car. And coming from, I guess, other cars like Japanese cars and stuff like that, I had a 350Z and then I owned 2 Subarus after that, one of which I didn't own for that long, but granted, with a lot of cars like that and cars in the tuner scene in general, some of them are very reliable, but to get the sort of power that this thing is pushing, or especially the sort of power that this car is capable of, it just typically takes a lot more effort, and cars have to be a lot more overbuilt to do what this can do, basically straight out of the factory. And yes, there are reliability problems and weird issues with these cars like there is with any car. For instance, the MT82 transmission is not the greatest transmission in the world, but overall, this is a very reliable car and is not something that I'm nearly as worried about beating on or abusing in the same way as I would have been with like my WRX or even my 350Z in comparison. I know that this will take it, and that is a really good feeling as an owner of a car. The number 6 thing that I love about my Ford Mustang GT would be the sound system. This car is equipped with, I believe, the Ford Shaker 1000 sound system, and it sounds really great straight out of the factory. It is not the best, the clearest audio system that I've ever heard in my entire life, but for a stock system from a car that is, at this point, 12 years old, it's really good, and I don't have any complaints about it. I don't really have any plans with replacing it right now. I'm pretty impressed with what it does out of the factory, and as someone who is a musician and who really enjoys music and playing music probably way too loud at times on road trips, I enjoy still being able to hear it and it not sounding like a muddy mess at high volumes. And in fact, it seems like the harder you push it, the clearer it sounds in a lot of ways, which is nice. It's a good feeling, it's a good sound system, and I very much appreciate that. The number 7 thing that I love about my Ford Mustang GT would be the overall comfort of the car. Now, in the last video on things that I hate about this car, I mentioned the uncomfortability of the Mustang's suspension. That is because the suspension that is on this car is pretty much shot. But overall, passing over the suspension on this car in particular that's kind of worn out, the seats and the overall feel of the interior and the roominess and stuff like that actually makes this a surprisingly comfortable car. This is a far more comfortable car than, like, for instance, my 350Z was, which is a car that's like, I guess, of similar category. Obviously this is a muscle car and that's a sports car, but they both kind of fall under the umbrella of sports cars. And this is a car that has a lot more space in a lot of different ways. I'm really tall, I'm like 6'4" or 6'5"-ish, and I have plenty of headroom in this car, which is really nice. I don't feel cramped with like my legs to the dashboard or anything like that. I can have everything adjusted really nice for me, which is something that doesn't happen in a lot of cars that I like. So this is very nice. I appreciate it. It's a very comfortable car for me. I daily drive it and I really don't have any complaints other than the suspension, which is kind of just my car in particular. So, Mustang GT, or I guess really any Mustang, pretty comfortable car for the performance that you get. The number 8 thing that I love about my Ford Mustang GT is the retro interior. I really like the retro styling of this car in general, but I particularly like the styling of the interior. Now again, in the last video I did talk about how the quality of the interior, like what different things are made of, the materials or whatever, are not necessarily the greatest, but I think that the design of the interior, Making up words again, Colton. But the design of the interior is generally really nice, and I think that it's well put together, and the aesthetic of it in general really matches the retro looks of the outside, and does really put you in mind of like a Mustang from the 60s with that sort of like the like double bubble dashboard sort of thing. I'm describing this so badly. But regardless, I really like the overall design of the interior. Could the materials be better? Yes, but generally, it's something that I just enjoy sitting in the car and looking at it and looking at the gauges. The gauges look super retro, and as a fan of retro styling, that's something that I really like. And generally, I am a fan of the interior, despite the fact that it's not the nicest interior material-wise, but oh well, it's a 2011. The number 9 thing that I really love about my Mustang GT is the overall raw driving experience. Now, this is not raw in the same way that like an S2000 is raw, where like you can really feel everything that the tires are doing or something like that. But this car is just a good old-fashioned mischief machine. It's got a solid rear axle, it's got a big powerful engine, it's got a 6-speed manual, and there's not a lot that's keeping this car from blowing the rear tires off at any given moment, which is incredibly fun. And with some general suspension updates and suspension modifications that I plan to do in the future, some of that rawness that's, you know, similar to like what you'd expect from a Z car or something like an S2000, like I said, although albeit probably not exactly, is something that I do expect to get out of this. But in the meantime, just driving a Mustang even only of this age in comparison to like a new one with their independent rear suspension and their nicer interiors and stuff like that, this is just a much more raw and violent feeling car, which I know sounds like it contradicts the comfort thing, but it just feels like a hammer instead of a scalpel, and it is very fun in that way. It might not be what everyone's looking for, but if you enjoy a raw driving experience, I would say that this delivers it in the way that the power is given and the overall feeling of the car. And if you're willing to do some suspension upgrades, you can probably carry on that feeling through the corners as well. And the number 10 thing that I love about my Ford Mustang GT is the absolutely huge aftermarket. This is probably the most popular sports car that has literally ever been sold. I don't have exact numbers to back that up, but I think almost anyone would be hard-pressed to find a car that has sold more than the Ford Mustang when it comes to the sports car category. It is a car that you can see literally anywhere, for better or for worse. Any street corner, practically anywhere you are, at least in the United States, you'll see a Mustang of some generation, of some engine, of some trim level, and because of that, the aftermarket is absolutely massive. They have basically anything you could ever want to do to a Mustang. And there are several brands that make parts specifically for Mustangs as a platform and nothing else. Now granted, the other cars that I've owned before too, like the WRX and the 350Z, also had a really big aftermarket with tons of support, but it's just really nice to buy a platform and not have to worry about, you know, not having parts availability or something like that. And that is something that is really never going to be an issue with a Mustang. They have absolutely unbelievable part support, and they are an incredibly fun car that you can do pretty much whatever you want with. Want to put nitrous on it? No problem. Want to twin turbo it? No problem. Want to get literally one of like 100 different superchargers? No problem. Want drag radials? No problem. You want to put practically any different type of suspension on it? No problem. You want to customize the exterior styling in almost any way possible? No problem. No matter what you do, you will not have a problem doing it on a Mustang, and that is a good feeling as an owner. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps out, and I will see you guys all in the next one.